King Charles III on Sunday was formally proclaimed the monarch in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The moves in the rest of the United Kingdom came a day after the same proclamation was made in London at a pomp-filled accession ceremony steeped in ancient tradition and political symbolism. In Edinburgh, the proclamation was followed by a gun salute and a military band playing the anthem, God Save the King. Similar ceremonies took place in Belfast and at Cardiff Castle. Earlier proclamations were held in other parts of the Commonwealth, the group of former British Empire colonies, including Australia and New Zealand.
We therefore, the Lords spiritual and temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby with one voice and consent of tongue and heart publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign, happy of memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace on the 10th day of September and in the year of our Lord 2022.
Joining us now from our Abuja studio to discuss global and African expectations as they relate to the new King Charles III is Professor Ken Ife, a London Enterprise Ambassador and Chief Economic Strategist at the ECOWAS Commission. Good morning, Professor Ken Ife, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ruben.
Thank you. Well, quickly, Prof, let's have your take on the Queen's final journey and the expectations from this side, the Commonwealth, and from Africa. Now that there is a new era beginning as another ends, with Charles III having been proclaimed King of England.
Well, let me begin by joining the hundreds of millions of people worldwide in offering our condolences and in appreciating the great work that the Queen has done, Her Majesty the Queen, and then of course the optimism that we all share about the future of a Commonwealth that is led by King Charles III. I have had the opportunity of working with Her Majesty government in many capacity, advisory capacity, sitting in so many of the boards. And then I've also had an encounter with the King Charles. He's under his auspices of his Prince's Business Trust. And I can tell you that, Ruben, in 1986, 10 years after he started this business, I was greatly inspired by what he was doing in the minority communities and helping the disadvantaged people, uplifting so many people, and there are now almost 1 million people then. And in that 1986, I was just about to leave for Nigeria after having completed my PhD, did my MBA, did my law degree, LLM. Then I said, okay, I started the second PhD to be able to do something, because I wondered if the King Charles could do so much for our community, and given the backdrop of all the crises we are having in Tottenham, Broadwater Farm riots and Brixton riots, that I should be able to contribute something before leaving for Nigeria. And that was how I engaged as a volunteer to the Princess Trust Business Trust, very greatly inspired by what he was doing. And then I now went out into the community, had over 50 community centers doing computer trading across London, and then got into so many other things, even not London sixth form, I was very instrumental in getting a mentor program set up there. And then between me and Shell, we funded them to do a standard template, and they spread that across the whole schools, sixth form schools in the country. So these were just many of the interactions that I had, and very, very inspired by those. And I can tell you that the way I saw it was government with open arm to embrace initiatives that will support young people and encourage them to transit, and then some of the disaffected youth as well. And a lot of them were mainly from ethnic minority, but there were many others that are mainstream. So that work was so encouraging. I didn't go in as an employee. I went in as a business person, and then I went ahead and never looked back. And even to the point that even though I served in many of Her Majesty's like Home Office, Community Development Foundation, I served in quite a few, many organizations, many capacities. Even during the period of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, I was vice president of Dynasty Growth Strategy. I was, so many of them. That was when the mayor also made me the London Enterprise Ambassador. And I was just about, there was no limits with the government. Get in, do something positive, and then influence the fate of millions of our people that are all there in the diaspora. So that was very helpful. And I know that that spirit will continue because, and now that he has ascended to the throne, I'm sure his prince will take over all those jobs. And then I know that he was very, very positive about the relationships with the Commonwealth. That's why, of course, they quickly accepted him even before the Queen passed to continue to head Commonwealth.
Right, you talked about the continuation, sir, but where might we see departures, especially if the monarchy is to survive as an institution? I'm sure you're well aware that there are a lot of people who find it anachronistic, even those who are great fans of the Queen, Elizabeth II, and even of King Charles III, feel that it needs to be changed. There's been, general reports that Prince Charles, as he then was in favor of a streamlined monarchy. But what else do you think he might do? What direction might he take as king?
Well, the circumstances of Prince Charles, King Charles, are not quite the same as the mother. King Charles has embraced a much higher level of education, and over the period he was prince, he was also tempted on many occasions to express himself and express his views, which is not unacceptable. But I know that some of those views will probably now be subdued in some respect. But he has a very far-reaching, open approach to and then of course a lot of that came from the Queen, because the Queen wasn't about glamour. The Queen was pragmatic and very, very listens, talk. So she was very, very open, and a lot of that is going to be taken on board by Prince. But much of the work that he has done will now be passed on to others. So we're not going to see an end to Princess Youth Business. I don't think so. If anything, it will probably expand. And as you know, it has even expanded. Initially, when I embraced it, the focus was 18 to 30-year-old. But now it's 11 to 20. A lot of action is going on in education. It's using online learning techniques. It's all expanding. It's gone into Australia. It's gone into New Zealand and to Canada. So it's expanding. And I can see a lot of that happening, but not under his direct involvement, but others. So much of the things he's doing on the environment is a very strong voice on global decarbonization program and environment. It's a very strong voice that you could see a lot of that will get input, but others will have to drive the program. So the way he comes across bodes well for the future of the kingdom, and also in making sure that he empowers and strengthens the Commonwealth. We've also under the leadership of Chief Emeka Anyoko see Commonwealth move to get nearer the business community. We have Commonwealth Business Council. We had also Commonwealth Development Association, and so they were involved in finance, and so gradually, because originally it was all thought around culture and social and all the educational, but now it's also entering into the business arena to support a business. Not in the same way and scale as United Nations, but the way that they could sustainably carry it forward.
Right. So I also want to segue the conversation to how can potential Nigerian businesses benefit from all of these ecosystems, also to segue the conversation into the Nigerian British Association and the Commonwealth Business Council.
Yeah, we've actually seen the Brexit actually favoring a stronger business and economic ties with the UK, between Nigeria and UK and Africa. So we're now seeing a lot more attention to us in the economic sense. So we hope to consolidate that. And there are many interests coming to, specifically in Nigeria. We have seen what has happened with China and the US and how both of them are no longer doing it as close. And now Nigeria is a focus of organic produce coming into Europe, coming into UK, coming into America. So we're going to see a lot more involvement there in making sure that two-way trade is on a mutually acceptable ground. So it's no longer going to be what it used to be, commodity exports, and then you have the West producing finished product for us to consume. I think we are now moving into a much more robust partnership relationship. And also, I don't even see the future of grants to African countries. I think they are now looking for partnership, what you call knowledge transfer partnership, where whatever inventions that they have, they'll put it on the table, we'll work together. Whatever products we have, we've invented or researched, we'll put it together, we'll work towards it so their resources can come. Just around the same way as you had aid for trade, we're now talking about knowledge transfer partnership and working together to mutually satisfy. So we want to see evolution of serious trade relationship and investment in industrial capacity and investment in building trade capacity as well as in industrialization. So value addition is going to be at the center, the epicenter of this kind of relationships. That's how I see them going forward.
Well, Prof, I would just like to have your comment on the sub-narrative that has emerged with persons of the former empire, former colonies, saying, oh, the death of the Queen should not be celebrated, and that after all, she's a symbol of persecution, of oppression, of colonialism, and trying to draw specific attention to specific incidents and experience in Africa and in some of the former colonies. What do you think of this? Because King Charles III taking over will probably inherit the same, sentiments by persons whose countries used to be former British colonies. Do you think it's a fair assessment to blame her for all the woes of colonialism, even in countries that have been independent for more than 60 years and that have not been able to manage their own affairs? But people keep blaming the outsider.
Well, that blame game won't go away, and the history also won't go away. But we have to realize that we cannot take away from the Queen what she has done to bring her contribution in bringing stability to the colonies and to the British Empire and the United Kingdom, as it were. And then we cannot take away the strenuous and concerted effort of the Prince within his own limits to energize the community and show sympathy and encouragement into the disadvantaged and building capacity at that bottom level, bottom up. But we can't take all those away. Those agitations will not go away. There is, and also don't forget that whilst the colonies have their own case, also the kingdom itself has its own tensions around Northern Ireland and Wales and Scotland and all of that. So I think we have to be a bit more positive about the opportunity to, if there's going to be exit in any area, it has to be an orderly exit, and then one that will not lead to conflict. And I think nobody has foreclosed any door to any kind of situation, but I think we will have to approach them, with maturity and a great sense of order. So that's how I see that, and I see Charles as very open, King Charles as very open, and events are shaping the world. A lot of things going on right now across the world, not least the current tension and in the Baltic region. A lot of them would shape how we go forward into the future. But I see the government and the leadership of the King Charles as going to be extremely responsive and sensitive to some of these events that are evolving.
Right. The headlines just before the Queen's passing with regards to the royal family were critical. They were critical of the heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales, Prince William's children, attending a school that costs £50,000 a year when there's a cost of living crisis in the UK. You've just said how you imagine that King Charles III will be sensitive to things like this. But what kind of gesture might we see in terms of a crowd-pleasing move from the king? I mean, he doesn't have any formal powers with regards to governance, but there are lots of crowd-pleasing gestures, because if we actually know the meaning of our vocabulary, that's not a pejorative, that his mother was able to employ that guaranteed her successful 70-year reign, which is the reason why we see this well-deserved outpouring of grief for her. She was always sensitive to the people and had, crowd-pleasing gestures like paying taxes in the John Major years, letting go of the royal yacht Britannia because it was going to cost £17 million to refit. She was not extravagant and did not insist that it was refitted. What might Charles want to do in that line to, make the people happy, because they are public servants, glamorous public servants, but public servants nonetheless?
Well, I think if you remember, the Queen, at some point when we were having a great difficulty in the UK, actually opened up to taxing some of her revenue. So that happened. And I could also see when Charles was making his declarations, he gave up all his revenues from all his ventures to the government, in exchange for crown. So we've seen a lot of that. And I can tell you that the Queen has done his bit, but I think Charles may do more, because Charles has been on that front end of so many efforts in terms of enterprise and community engagement, community empowerment, and also on areas regarding the decarbonization and better. So he will be in a position to gently guide and interact, surreptitiously, help the debate along these areas to gain grounds. So I can see him actually delivering a lot more goods, public goods, than especially at his age, because he's coming into it around the age of 70 or something, and then I think he's going to want to do more to bequeath a legacy that is sustainable and economic. That's what I think.
Right.
I'm a bit more positive about the changes that he could bring about.
Okay, let's talk about development financing for businesses in Nigeria, which I'm concerned about. DFID had merged with the Commonwealth Office from the FCDO. And how can Nigerian businesses also be able to look at this new reign as a way to get inner access and inroads from the Commonwealth Office, now merged with the DFID, to get development financing for our business? Because you see, when you look at the overall thinking of the Prince's Trust, like you talk about, and FCDO now, it's about creating wealth in the Commonwealth.
No, if only we can borrow a leaf from the work that Princess Trust has done and the evolution of the work of the Princess Trust, is amazing stuff, I'm telling you. They have all kinds of programs addressing various segments of that minority focus and the disadvantaged focus. And then also you've seen what, name it, is either the great focus is young people, and then the employment, helping them into employment, education, getting them back into education and getting them into training. And if you see how that had been packaged and developed, and how they even rose to doing partnership with the Department of Health to ensure that there is the pathways exist for young and disaffected people to enter into the system in a sustainable, So, it's such a diversity. And then one problem we have in Nigeria is, ministries working as in silos. My experience with working with them and with the trust and the other things that I did is how you build bridges across castles. So if all those silo mentalities and, it's the bridge, he's built bridge, he's a bridge builder. So we can see a lot of lessons to be learned on how you holistically provide for this community and a variety of services, and then very, very inclusive, and then beginning to engage government and mainstream all this. So it's not just train them to find, no, mainstreaming them into employment, and then also helping them. And I also enjoy the, you know, when you apply for there's a grant element and a loan element of what they do. The grant element is, okay, you have an idea, take £500 and go and pilot it. Then you come back, let's evaluate your pilot, and then you get the loan, or you get a bigger grant. So it's a staged approach, and then inclusive, as well as you know. So we have so much to be learned about that. And then coming back to the opportunity, the window of opportunity we have to work with UK, as you can see that they're very serious about it, because they're now coming out and wanting to do business, and do business as partners, not in the previous ways other countries have taken their own. I don't want to get into all these other countries and how they have been working with other parts of Africa. But the UK government is coming out positively engaging and wanting to work across. There's no boundaries. You know, they want to work with us in agriculture, in export, in processing. No boundaries. And as partners, and as equal partners. So that is very, very encouraging. And in terms of development funding, I have also worked, I used to be, I think in 2010, 11, I was DFID, that's UK DFID Trade Advisor to Nigerian government. And my job then, in that period, was to help guide Nigeria to ascend to the WTO Trade Facilitation Program. And it was very empowering. You know, I worked across different 46 agencies, and then managed to get them to get into the WTO. So that was, we had another challenge similar to this, which was the accession to the Africa Continental Free Trade, which took much longer. But I enjoyed that period that I worked under their guide. And there were many areas that I faced the government and said, look, I want you to do this because the business wants it. And one of them was the Okerete in Oyo State. There's a boundary between Nigeria and Benin. And then I had to go and argue that I really want you to do this because all the businesses want to be involved in an enterprise zone, some economic zone between the two countries, and they did. They spent $2 million carrying out that feasibility study, showing that it is possible and it could work. And we've now taken over that kind of work in the ECOWAS region, because I've been chief consultant to ECOWAS since 2009. And now trying to build special economic zone between Nigeria and Republic of Benin. But that was started by the UK Department for Enterprise, Department of International Development.
Well, Prof, let me ask you, in terms of expectations and the reign of Charles III, some persons are already describing him as a climate monarch or as a green monarch, given the fact of his background as a climate change advocate and campaigner for decades. So the expectation is that he will continue with climate change advocacy as monarch. Will he be able to do that without necessarily coming across as taking sides, whereas as monarch, he's supposed to be impartial?
Well, even his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, remember he also occasionally says things and the politicians will come down on him like a ton of brick. But he himself has never hidden his views on many critical areas. So while he was prince, yes, he was doing that. But he has also now committed himself to doing a much bigger work with the country, and then leaving all of those agenda for others to he said it, that, well, I wouldn't have that time now to do this, but others will carry on with that. But the fact that he has championed this and he's now king would actually make the British government and the agents of British government to be much more ready to dialogue extensively. Reading the minds and lips, just by reading his body language. He doesn't need to get into the argument to get to the frame, but just by reading his antecedents and his dispositions to a favorable approach towards the climate change agenda would actually encourage British civil servants and politicians to do their utmost to ensure that this agenda is consolidated. So that gives them the atmosphere that Her Majesty His Majesty feels comfortable about this. So I think it would be an influence, but I don't think he's going to be putting himself in the firing line. I'm not sure he will do that.
Let's talk about what we cannot expect from King Charles I, because if we look at the immediate past Prime Minister, because I won't talk about Liz Truss, she's barely got her feet wet, Boris Johnson, he formed Her Majesty's government, but she really had naught to do with it. It was a democratically elected government, and it was that elected government that did what was described as morally reprehensible when they cut foreign aid by £4 billion, I believe it was. It was that government that decided to send asylum seekers to Rwanda and not the monarch. So what exactly should people not expect from Charles? Because I do think that quite a bit is expected. It's not an absolute monarchy.
Well, one thing I can tell you is, I'm not his advisor, but one thing I can tell you is that King Charles III is different from the mother, because of his level of exposure, because he has traveled widely, he's very highly more educated. And so you don't expect him to work with the Prime Minister, to mean Prime Ministers to come and brief him and then walk away without searching questions. Without, he would engage the ministers and the Prime Ministers in a discussion to understand why they had to do this. And I'm sure he will be able to engage with them, even though he will not openly be seen to be interfering, but you'll be talking to somebody that is very intelligent, that has been on the front line of some of these issues, and you would have to explain these things to him and get his buy-in. But I'm not sure he's going to be minded to intervene in an open way with the government. He will still let them rule, but don't expect that you will just come and then brief him and walk away. I think he would engage. He would engage in some discussion.
Okay, it would engage, but you see, there's the sticking point of how, to what level, to what length. Because this person, you said, has been exposed, he's gone to school, but we also know his antecedents. He likes to talk. He likes to pass an opinion. And if you dial back, when England was a republic for a brief period, we all know how the fight started. How a king that was supposed to understand separation of powers went to where the parliamentarians were meeting, and he tried to assert himself. And we had renegades like Oliver Cromwell saying, no, we will not take this. Funny enough, if my memory serves me right, I think that was a Charles too that did that. So how will this new king be able not to get into back and forth with the government? Secondly, this king too is not a saint. We know about hitherto scandals. We know about this same Prince's Trust and the monies collected in a bag from some billionaires from the East. Things like that are coming up and bubbling up. How will he balance it?
No, but that has been cleared. I mean, it became clear from investigations that were carried out that he wasn't, he wasn't privy to any shady deal. That has been cleared up by investigations. But one thing I have to say to you is, there are leaders that have a different approach to governance, and I think he's going to prove many of us wrong in terms of how we think that he might be able to perform, because he's very well enlightened and very well educated, and that he should be okay. Remember that during the briefing, there's secrecy around the weekly prime ministerial briefing. That doesn't mean that he cannot debate an issue with the prime minister. The thing is that the prime minister can not longer think that he can just come and brief and walk away. It's all done in secrecy, but I think he can engage the prime minister in his briefing to say, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Have you considered this? How about this? I mean, a lot of those questions are going to be asked. That doesn't mean that he's coming out to make public pronouncement. No. In the secrecy of that meeting, he will be able to ask questions. And I think it is good that he does ask questions because he has more antenna to get feedbacks from so many subjects and different territories and all of that, and informed of current opinions, global opinions, that he would ask questions. And that may mean you may have to go and rethink some policies and all of that. But I don't think that he will consciously want to become a problem to the administration, because he knows what those boundaries are.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Kennedy Faye, for joining us on the Morning Show. Thank you very much indeed.